What's up guys, my name is XANAA and hi, how's it going? Welcome to the Dum Dum Dum. We're gonna be talking about the franchise that turned this into this, and with that, let's get things started.
So, as you may have been aware, Blackbox was in charge of making the PlayStation 2 version of Hot Pursuit 2. They did an overall better job on it than EA Seattle did, making all the other versions, and so this time they were in charge of making Underground for all other devices that aren't Game Boy. Underground was always going to be something different, so they ditched the concept of driving sports and exotic vehicles in favor of bringing along major car customization. Creating a game like this made total sense due to the importer scene rising in popularity. I don't know, Fast and Furious might have something to do with that, like, I don't know, something about a car movie. But so EA figured, let's make a game about tuning cars, and so November 17th, 2003, Need for Speed Underground was released in North America, and it sold fantastically, selling 15 million copies worldwide. Hot Pursuit 2 sold 1.16 million copies in the US alone, and so, taking an educated guess, Hot Pursuit 2 probably sold anywhere between 2 to 3 million units worldwide, absolutely crushing that number with the release of Underground.
So, what's the fuzz about?
Well, it probably helped that when you start the game, Little John's Get Low starts playing. One of the most ball-busting songs ever made.
369, standing real fine, boom, checka, one more time.
So we have our main menu here, and there's the Underground mode, the main campaign mode of this game. There's Quick Race, your basic exhibition modes, basic statistics and options. In customized rides, we can tune cars to our liking without having to do it in the career mode, and you can play online.
What?
Well, let's see what story this game has to offer. So, here is gonna be your one and only spoiler warning of the Broom Broom Funny Tuner game. Not as if there is a big and meaningful story to begin with, but, anyway, let's start the game. The player begins the game in a circuit race in Olympic City. He wins the race only to be woken up from daydreaming by his contact Samantha, or at least that's what I think she is. She directly gets the player involved with the import scene and illegal street racing therein. After she helps you out by buying your first car, she then introduces the player to several other street racers that offer events to play. Later on, you get introduced to TJ, a mechanic who will work for you and reward you, provided you beat some of his time trial challenges. Eventually, when you start climbing your way up the ranking boards, a group known as the Eastsiders will confront the player after you've beaten several of their members. Eddie, the leader of this gang, along with Melissa, his girlfriend, will take notice of the player, and Eddie proceeds belittling the player for their achievements. Within time, the player develops too much reputation to be ignored by Eddie, who is the current best underground racer in Olympic City, and then proceeds to challenge the player to race Samantha in order to continue climbing upwards in the ranking boards. She gets annoyed upon the player accepting the challenge and loses after totaling the engine of her Honda Civic during a race. Her car gets taken by TJ for himself shortly after, and she gets deeply saddened by the player's willingness to race her and the loss of her Civic to TJ. Samantha then distances herself to the player, but building up to the end game after the player surpasses several members of the Eastsiders to claim the top ranking spot, TJ challenges the player to a pink slip race, and after winning, you return Samantha's Civic back to her, rekindling their friendship. Eddie then challenges the player in his Nissan Skyline, and after beating him, the player's crew are all willing to celebrate until a mysterious grey Nissan 350Z challenges the player to one final event. When beating the final event, your crew will celebrate for real this time, and the person in the 350Z is revealed to be Melissa,
Eddie's girlfriend, in case you forgot she had any significance to the plot.
That event solidifies the player's status as the best underground racer in Olympic City, and that's the plot.
So what we have is a racing game where the story basically breaks down to you go from being a nobody to becoming king of the street racing scene. It's basic storytelling from what you can expect from a racing game, and combining the words racing game and story with one another. But I do think the game executes a nice plotline where you have all these relationships with all these characters, like Samantha, or your rivalry with Eddie. And with that, let's get into the gameplay.
Just as a heads up, I'll be playing the PC version for this game throughout the video. There is absolutely nothing wrong with any of the console versions, other than that sometimes I just find it really hard to see what's coming up. And the PC version eliminates that problem and looks so much nicer. So, like I said earlier, together with Samantha, she hooks you up with a starter car you choose. So, I chose the Miata because the way it looks makes me look the way it feels. So, this is what our nearly 20-year-old game has us working with. Let's start off with the gameplay. The first event sees the player daydreaming in that Honda Integra we mentioned earlier. Admittedly, after not playing this game for 3 solid years, I absolutely sucked at the opening event. It also had to do with just getting an overall feeling for the controls, but once you got your starter car and did the first couple of races, I got the overall hang of it. The controls at worst feel a bit too finicky, but the overall car control feels amazing. I feel like you can always correct any mistake you make, without the game punishing you in return. It can sometimes feel a bit unforgiving when you go off-road, and it's also completely dependent on your car. Now, I'm a Honda Integra player, so I don't have a ton of experience playing that many other cars in this game, but a car like the Integra sticks great to the road and has good overall stability. And then a car like the 240SX has fantastic grip, but is quite a beast to handle. Next up, the Underground mode. This is basically the career mode with the race map revealing to you which events you can play. When entering an event, the game will give you 3 difficulty options with prize money handed out according to which difficulty you win the event with. There are circuit races. These are your typical lap racing events around a track. There are sprint races. This is just a race that has you driving from A to B. Then there's drag racing. The first time this would be featured in a mainline Need for Speed game. Then there are drifting events. Usually in these events your car is gonna decide if it's all gonna happen or not, but this game does have an e-brake, and whilst I never really use it during races, instead I find it to have a better overall usage here. And then there's Lap Knockout. Yeah, this made its way over from the classic Need for Speed games, and all it is the player crossing the finish line and last gets eliminated. Just survive each lap to the end. Then there is also the free run option here, and this isn't anything special, it's just to learn practice the tracks and setting times on them. Then throughout the career mode, there's a couple of times TJ or Samantha will challenge you to beat their time on some events, and they'll give you some kind of performance or tuning part whenever you do so. There will also be tournaments throughout the career, and these will consist of one type of event with a points tally system. When beating tournaments, you either get to see your cars featured on a car magazine, or you get rewarded with either visual customization, body parts, or performance upgrades.
Oh hi! The tuning, of course.
The tuning basically being one of the key elements that defined this game for what it is now. First and foremost, we have our bank, the overall dosh we can spend. There's a style counter, and our car has a reputation meter. Every star is a bonus multiplier for style points, and reputation will be required to enter tournaments. You can obviously customize car bumpers, the tires, headlights, spoilers, hoods, and even neons and exhaust pipes. There's also finals and decals, but they'll always be put on a certain place on the car. So you then create a ride from this to this.
I'm somewhat of an engineer.
And once you become tired of seeing the same car or want something better, you can trade it with another one. Throughout the game, you'll unlock other cars you can drive with. Each one with different drivability, like I mentioned earlier with the 240SX and the Integra. Most of the car roster consists of Japanese cars, with there only being a few European and American cars present. But obviously, if you're on PC, that means you can mod in different cars, of course.
Haha! But not yet though. More on that later.
I still want to talk about some of the stuff that's a part of the base game. First off, the overall music. Now, I've let's played this game, so I know what it's like getting stuck on all sorts of events and having to trim a 40-minute recording down to 20 minutes. But with that came listening to a lot of the in-game soundtrack, and so on the menus, you'll listen to rap songs, and during the races, most likely rock music. I already told you about how Little John's "Bird Dum Dum Dum" was a huge selling point when starting up the game, but there's also other equally stupid catchy songs that just work fantastic. Nate Dogg's "Keep It Coming" being another great one.
My memories fade, wasn't that long ago.
P.D. Pablo's "Need for Speed" obviously being iconic for this game.
Need for speed. I got a need for speed. I got a need for speed.
Or Mystical's "Smashing the Gas."
Get out the way. Move.
But of course also the soundtrack that's playing during races.
Your different reality is trying to take me. They're trying to make me. No. Stay under control. We're under control. It's okay, don't apologize. Taste your swallow down.
I'm just attracted to corny video game music, what can I say? Then next we have the map itself, and while there isn't any free roam in the base game, it could have been something they intended on doing with the free run setting. Even if you can't in the official game, the overall world building I still think is pretty stunning. You have the huge city skyline towers, the Chinatown, the park, the harbor. You'd really have to play the game again to get a general idea of what the map is like, but why not use a mod that allows us to use free roam? So this is the amazing free roam mod made by HockeyGuy731 that allows you to drive wherever you please. Now of course there are certain parts of the world that just sort of stop since the devs never intended you to see this, but just how cool is this? Then next up, I wanted to just mention this video itself. Getting this game installed and working on a modern Windows 10 PC really sucked ass to do so. And so this is the video that helped me get the game fully functioning. Then next there is this graphics mod made by Strelitzia, which is insane. Underground obviously has its limits, but to still have a fan base this dedicated to make a game look from this to this.
All I'm saying is, Nintendo would probably terminate everything.
There's also a bunch of car mods obviously, and so if you want to drive with a Ferrari F430 then you absolutely can. Or if you want a different Impreza in the game, who's stopping you to do so? And there's still people keeping the online play alive nowadays. I do wish there were more mods, but maybe in the future we can get something like the size of Most Wanted's Redux mod even for this game. However, all the general modding support this game has already received I think is really cool. So that mainly rounds up everything I had to talk about. I want to wrap things up by mentioning my own personal experience playing this game, as well as mention some pros and some cons. To start things off, my first time playing this game was for a blind let's play on this channel, and although I enjoyed the game, I was always very eager to pass each event and move on with the game as swiftly as possible. I didn't really spend a lot of time just enjoying the game for what it was, and all I ended up understanding about the game was Tuner Boy has dream and wants to be the number one on all the leaderboards. Something about the East Siders being a crew of baddies, and it's the early 2000s and the importer scene was growing at an all-time high. You can tune lots of cars, and it's difficult to see since I was playing a GameCube copy of this game. And then I moved on straight to the second game, and I also remember none of its story. I don't know. Something about a buttload of car tuning. I played it to about the end, but never seemed to unlock the last URL event. So I never finished Underground 2. Then only last year I replayed through Underground 2 on console and I was able to finish it and enjoy it. But then earlier this year I decided playing Underground 1 again would be a good idea, since I remember liking this game's overall pacing much better than Underground 2's. And so I replayed it, and revisiting it at my own pace was just so much more enjoyable, to the point I've really been looking forward to making this video. And so that's where I'm at with this game. I really liked the general gameplay and pacing of the game. You know exactly when it starts and when it's gonna end. The world building and overall aesthetic of this game, I just really enjoy. A very small and obscure sense of detail I really love is, for example, Jose is one of the first guys you race against, usually since he's the one hosting races, so in the start of the game, you race him in his stock Volkswagen. But then later on in the game, when you keep racing him, he's also made progression to upgrading his car. The music is a major contribution to the game, and yeah, as an overall package, this is just what I'd like a bit more over Underground 2. But that being said, there are still a few things that do piss me off. For one, the rubber banding sure is very present in this game. It's not a deal breaker since I do play on the hardest difficulty anyway, but it is constant even on the lowest difficulty. Then I do want to address the nitro system since all you seem to get in this game is just this green gauge and it never refills. However, this also creates a risk versus reward element. Do you use your nitro sparingly or as soon as you make a mistake? And whilst I do praise the overall world design a ton, I can't overlook the San Francisco-esque part of the map. You know the part. This part completely sucks. I wish they spaced each street out a bit more rather than it being so clustered up. And I've had many unforced errors happen here many times. Speaking of unforced errors, most of the time drag racing can just be a complete pain in the ass to deal with. The AI traffic cars trigger whenever you pass a certain section on the track, so it requires you driving in a certain way and sometimes they just spawn randomly anyway, which means you have to awkwardly move yourself around the map strategically. Later on in the game, when you're more so getting to the end, the game starts testing you in terms of endurance. This means you'll be doing lap races that just have you going on for about 6 to 7 laps or so, and while I get it, the game wants to test your overall endurance, it's annoying and it breaks the pacing a little bit. And then obvious wishes I would have wanted is there being a free roam feature, even if it was just optional, and I think cops being absent is also still a bit strange. In the last game they were as relentless as they can be, but here they're nowhere to be seen, even though P.D. Pablo mentions them in his Need for Speed song. Maybe they could have been implemented like in Hot Pursuit 2, but not quite as aggressive, and yeah, I think that's all there is to discuss.
And with that, yeah, thoughts, feelings, emotions. I had a fantastic time playing this again for this review. I can't recommend enough playing this game for yourself. And yeah, with that, thank you guys all for watching. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and peace out!